Hi, my name is Marina Negretti and I'm a recreation coordinator with Valleywide Recreation and Park District. Today I'm going to be showing you how you can make this mask here that you can wear while you're out performing essential tasks. At this point in time, it is mandatory for you to be wearing your mask when you leave your house. So in the interest of leaving as many medical masks for the medical community as possible, please consider making one of your own. Let's start the tutorial. I've gone ahead and laid out the supplies that we're going to need for this. You're going to need some pins. You're going to need scissors. You don't need two pairs. The only reason I do is because one is for my fabric and one is for my paper. But if you're not particular, then you just need one pair of scissors. The next is you're going to need some paper and something to draw with. You're going to need a measuring tape, and you're going to need some fabric. Now, thankfully, I have fabric stocked up because I sew a lot. But if you don't, Walmart is an essential store. It is still open, and they do have fabric. So that is somewhere that you can get some fabric for this project. What you're going to need is 100% cotton. That is what the CDC is recommending, so that's what we're going to use. I have a bunch of different fabrics here, but I'm going to use a bright one so that you can see what I'm doing more easily. You're going to need at least 20 to 30 inches of fabric. So the first thing I'm going to show you is how I made this pattern piece. What I did was I took my tape measure and I measured parts of my face. So what I did is I went from the tip of my nose down to a little bit underneath my chin, and that measurement for me was 5 inches. And then I took from ear to ear, and that measurement for me was 10.5 inches. From there, I drew out a chart for me to follow on a piece of paper. And what I did was I divided the measurement of my ear to ear in half, because I'm only going to be making the pattern pieces are only going to be for 1/2 of my face. So I took 5.25 inches, drew a line, and then I took 5 inches and drew a line. So now I have this sort of T-shape. This is the basics of how to draw your mask pattern. So from here, I sort of guessed a little bit, but what I did was I took a diagonal to about here and another one at the bottom to sort of, this is going to be to contour the mask to your face, like so. I drew lines back to my 5.25. And then what I did was I just sort of guessed. I started from the top and I made a curve all the way to the bottom, like so. So I went from the top here, made a curve all the way to the bottom, and then I made sort of a diagonal shape, and then a straight line. And I connected these lines like so. So from the top corner, I made a curve shape, and then straight down, and then from the bottom of the curve, I just went straight across. This is going to be my pattern piece. So what you can do, you're just going to cut this out. And I will be putting a link below to a free PDF printable pattern if that's more easy for you to follow. I don't have a printer at home, so I just guessed, and it ended up with a pattern piece like so. So they're pretty similar. So that is how you can make your own pattern for this if you don't have a printer like me. From there, you're going to take your fabric What they're recommending right now is you want 3 layers of 100% cotton to protect your face. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to take your fabric of choice. You're going to lay down your pattern piece, make sure that it fits. And again, you will need 20 to 30 inches of fabric for this project. And the reason why is because we're going to be making bias tape for this. So make sure that you have enough. Just for the mask itself, all you're really going to need is 13 by 21 inches if you have a smaller face like mine. So from here, my fabric is already folded in half. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it over again and again. And this is going to give me 6 pieces of my pattern. And you want to make sure that when you're laying out your pattern that you have enough seam allowance. So for that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to roughly draw around 1/4 inch around my pattern. You can do this with a Sharpie if you want to, if you're not really particular about your fabric, but these lines won't show up after you're finished sewing it. So you can use a water-soluble marker, anything so that you can see what you're tracing. So I went ahead and traced around 1/4 inch of my pattern to give me some seam allowance. And now I'm just going to cut it out. You can trace and cut these out one at a time if you're worried about symmetry, but for my preference, I don't mind cutting all 6 out at once. So now I have 6 of the pattern pieces. What we're going to do next is we're going to make the bias that's going to outline the mask. And like I showed you earlier, it's going to outline the mask and it's also going to be the straps. So it's important that we do this step. I'm going to need 3 strips of bias, and you can use the same fabric if you want to, but I'm going to use a complementing color. I'm going to grab some green fabric that I have, and I'm going to make the bias out of that. The bias doesn't need to be 100% cotton. It can be any fabric, really. The important part is that the actual mask itself is 100% cotton. So I lied, this is actually going to be yellow fabric. This is an old pillowcase. So if you have, if you're going to be using an old pillowcase like I am, what you're going to do is you're going to cut out 1.5 inch strips from your pillowcase, and you're going to need 1.5 by 56 inches at the end if you aren't using a pillowcase. So if you have like 60-inch fabric, then you can cut strips out of that, but I'm using a pillowcase because it's all I have right now. Well, it's the only complementary color that I have for this fabric. So, just going to take my pillowcase, cut it open, and now I have my fabric. So from here, I'm just going to lay it flat. I'm going to take my pen and my tape measure. From the edge in, I'm going to mark 1.5 inches, and I'm just going to make a series of dots marking where 1.5 inches is on my fabric. Now that I have my fabric marked, I'm just going to cut along these dots and get my strip. And if you're using a pillowcase like me, you're going to need 5 of these. If you're using fabric that is long enough, you're only going to need 3. And you can take a yardstick and just draw one big line that you can follow all the way down, but I just prefer to do the dots because it's faster. And most pillows do have this decorative edge here where the fabric is folded over. I'm just going to cut that off. I don't need that. So here's one strip of fabric. And this can be rough, it doesn't need to be perfect. I'm going to go ahead and cut 4 more, and I'll meet you back when we're sewing. Okay, so now that you have your strips of fabric, what we're going to do is we're going to make this into bias. And the way that we do that is I'm going to attach some of these strips together to make them a little bit longer. And you can purchase bias from craft stores. I do believe Walmart carries it, but if you can't find it, this is how you make it. So what you're going to do is you're going to lay one piece of fabric on top of the other perpendicularly, and you're going to sew from this corner down to this corner. So I'm going to show you that now. And you can pin this in place. I've been sewing for a while, so I feel comfortable not pinning it. But if you aren't there yet, then I do recommend pinning it just because it can be bothersome when the fabric slips out of place. So now that that is sewn, we're going to cut off the excess here along this seam. And just trim the string there. Now you'll see this is one continuous piece of fabric. And that's how you make bias. So the reason that I said to cut 5 strips of these is because we're going to need 2 very long ones like this one here and 1 short one, which is the length of the pillowcase that we did, because the 2 long ones are actually going to make up the top of the mask and the bottom of the mask. So it's going to make up the top piece here and then be a strap to tie around your face. So we'll need 2 long ones and 1 short one to do the sides and the open panel in the back. Okay, so now that we have all of our pattern pieces cut out and our bias strips made, we're going to start assembling our mask. So what you're going to do is you're going to take 2 of your pattern pieces and you're going to go wrong sides together. You're going to match up the corners and you're going to sew along this curve. And again, you can pin this. I just don't think it's necessary for myself, but if you're a beginner, definitely pin it. Okay, so here we go. And I'm going to sew this with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, and that's one piece of our mask sewn together. And I'm going to go ahead and do this with the rest of my pieces, and I'll show you how to assemble them. Okay, so I've gone ahead and sewn all 6 of my pattern pieces so that they match with their other halves. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 2 of these. Start with 1. I'm going to open the seams, and you can iron these down. I don't have an iron right now, so I'm just going to open them. Same with the other one. And you're going to put wrong sides together. You're going to just smush the seams up against each other. So you want them to be mirrored halves. You want the top to be at the top and the bottom to be at the bottom. and you're going to push those open seams right up against each other. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to pin this in place. Okay, and I'm going to do that from the top down, and the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to open the seams, and then match the seam together and then pin it down. So I'll go ahead and do that. Okay, so here it is, all pinned, front and back. Now what I'm going to do is this seam down the middle, I'm going to stitch right down the middle. It's called stitching in the ditch. So I'm just going to follow this seam down and put these two pieces together. And you do want to remove your pins as you go. The reason for this is if your sewing needle catches a pin, it can actually break your sewing needle. With that done, these two pieces are connected together. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew together the edges. And for this part, I don't really feel like I need to pin it, so I'm just going to lay it flat and sew it. Do that for both sides. Now these two pieces are connected. So what we're going to do now is we're going to bring in this third piece that we left behind. Okay, we're going to find the top, and you know the top because it's got more of a curve than the bottom. So this is the top. We're going to take our bias. This is the short one that we did before. And we're going to lay it on the right side of the third piece of fabric, and we're going to pin that in place. So from the edge, and the reason that I'm pinning it here is because there is a curvature, and it's much easier to follow a curve when it's pinned in place. Okay, so here it is, all pinned in place. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the end here and I'm going to trim that off. We still have plenty of bias left from our little short bias strip. So now what I'm going to do, now that it's all pinned, I'm going to sew right along this edge, taking out the pins as I go. Okay, so now that this is sewn down, what we're going to do is we're going to take the bias here and we're going to flip over our fabric so that the wrong side is facing us. We're going to fold our bias until it meets the raw edge of the fabric, like so, and then fold it over again. And what this is going to do is it's going to close off the raw edge and give it a nice finished look. So I'm just going to pin that in place, and I'm going to do this for the rest of the bias. So again, we're going to fold it over, so this is it flat on the other side, fold it over, fold it so that it meets the raw edge of the fabric, and then fold it over again so that it covers the raw edge, and pin that in place. And I'm going to do this for the rest of the top of the mask. Okay, so here it is, all pinned in place. Now I'm just going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance again in place. So here we go. There we go. Okay, so this next bit gets a little tricky, but if you're patient, then you'll be just fine. So now what we're going to do is we're going to bring back the piece that is two of them sewn together. Okay, we're going to take a strip of our longer bias binding, bias strip, whatever you want to call it, and we're going to do the same process that we just did to this one, to this one. So you want to be sure that you're taking the middle of your bias and you want to put the right side, which is the side that has a seam and not excess fabric. You're going to put the right side to the right side of your mask. And you want to make sure that you're doing the top edge right now. Okay, so take the middle of your bias, put right sides to right sides, and start pinning from the middle out. Okay, so we've got one half pinned. Now we're going to do the next half. I'm going to sew this again with a 1/4 inch all along the seam, and you want to start right where your mask fabric starts. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so now we've got our bias sewn to the top. And we're going to do the same thing that we did with the other one. Flip it over. Fold it until the raw edge meets the raw edge. And then fold it over so that you're encasing the raw edge. And then I'll show you what we're going to be doing with the strips in just a second. But for now, just do exactly what we did before. Fold it over until it meets the raw edge, and I'll get a little bit closer so I can kind of show you just exactly what's going on here. Okay, you're going to fold it over so that it reaches the raw edge of the fabric, just like that, and you're going to fold it over, okay, so that it encases the raw edge and it leaves a nice finished edge. You're going to pin that down, just like that. So start from the middle out, go to each edge, and then I'll show you what we're going to be doing with the excess fabric. Okay, so I've went ahead and pinned up until we get to the excess fabric right here. And I'm going to show you what we're doing with that. So what we're going to do is, starting from the edge, you're going to fold these two raw edges together and then fold it in half and then pin this in place. And you're going to do that all the way down the length of this strip. So I'll show you again. And you want them to be, when you fold it, you want each side of the fabric to look as even as possible. So you're going to fold it so that the raw edges meet, fold it in half, pull it taut, and then pin it again. And you're going to do this down the entire length of the fabric on both sides. So I'll meet you there when you're done. I've pinned it at the top and all along the strip. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start at one end of this strip, sew all the way down, sew over the mask, and then sew all the way down this strip as well. So let's do that. Okay, this is what the front looks like. And these are the sides. This is what is going to tie behind your head. So that's what that looks like. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take the third piece from earlier and we're going to take it the wrong side up against the inside of your mask. So this is the front. You can see because there's no excess bias folding over. This is the back. Okay, so we're going to do the wrong side of this fabric to the inside of the mask. And we're going to go end to end. And we're going to sew down the length of this edge here. And we're going to do that for both sides of the mask. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay. So the reason that we've done this is because now there's a pocket where you can put a filter. And again, you don't want to purchase like a medical filter because the medical community does need those right now. What you're going to want to get is a, if you want a filter in this, they are recommending 3 layers of cotton. So if you wanted to put a filter in here, then now you have the option to. If you didn't, then you could have just sewn all 3 layers together at the beginning and bound it together with the bias tape without doing all these extra steps. But if you want to put a filter, then what you can do is you can get some air conditioning filters, like the big long strips that look like accordions, and you can cut the pieces out with the same pattern piece that you used to make the mask and just slide it right here in this pocket. So now you have that option. Last bit, we're going to sew the bottoms together. So along this edge, we're just going to stitch a line so that the pocket is closed. Okay, so here you go. This is the mask, and its pocket is now closed, so you can go ahead and stick your filter in there. 3 layers of 100% cotton is what they recommend, but if you want to put a filter, again, now you have the option to. So the next thing is we're going to close off this raw edge here using that short strip of bias that we had excess from earlier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold over a little bit of the top here. I'm going to line it up. Sorry, I'll go on the other side first. I'm going to line it up with where this bias ends. Okay. Actually, you're going to want the fold to be on the outside with that little fold there. And you're going to sew it down. And you can pin this in place. And you're just going to cut off the excess, the same length of the fabric underneath. So let's cut that off. Okay. And then we're going to do the same binding method as before. So we're going to flip this over, fold it until it meets the raw edge, and then fold it over itself and stitch it down. Okay, so there we go. That's one raw edge bound. You can start to see that it's starting to come together a little bit. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing with the other side, and I'll meet you there. Okay, so here's the mask with both edges bound. And now we're just going to do the bottom. And we're going to do the bottom exactly the same way that we did the top. So we're going to take our final long bias strip and start in the middle. Pin it down wrong side to right side, starting from the middle out, and do the same process with the strips on the outside, and then we'll be done. So I'm going to go ahead and pin this and sew it, and I'll meet you when we're done. And that is how to make your own face mask. If you followed this tutorial, if you made it with this video, go ahead and share it with us under the hashtag ValleyWideInside so that we can see it on our social media. You can find us at ValleyWideRec on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. All of those social media pages will be linked in the description box below. Be sure to check GoRecreation.org on our online recreation center for some ideas on how you can stay busy while remaining inside your house. Thank you for watching, and remember to stay safe, stay inside, and stay healthy. Again, my name is Marina Negrete with Valleywide Recreation and Park District. Thanks for watching.